A riff like this that I'm about to play for you seems very complex to somebody that doesn't really understand what's going on. Let me play the riff real quick. There's really only a few ideas you need to truly understand, truly focus on to be able to play guitar like this. The first idea is right hand picking. The second idea is finger agility. Essentially the idea for your left-hander, your fretting hand, to move around the fretboard in interesting ways without it being too difficult. And the last idea is the metalcore scale, or this 5/7/8 scale, basically the only scale, the only 7 notes that make up probably about 90% of metalcore riffs, especially the ones in the early 2000s like Killswitch, Bullet for My Valentine, As I Lay Dying, all those awesome bands. In this video, we're going to go over 9 techniques that should eventually become second nature to you, because if this is the style of riffing that you're going to want to play, you're going to use these techniques on a regular basis. And if you have these in your back pocket to where you don't have to really think about them, they just come naturally, then that is when you were able to just pick up the guitar and just start playing some dope-ass metalcore riffs. So in this video, we're going to talk about 9 metalcore techniques that need to become second nature here as soon as possible, because you're going to use them and you're going to see them in pretty much all the riffs that you play. The 9 techniques that we're going to talk about today are going to be down and alternate chugs, galloping, string skipping, alternate and tremolo picking, legato and trills, slides, the notorious pinch harmonic, and the last technique, what's such a very, very important technique for this style of riffing, is what I call economy riffing. So when I teach these techniques generally to my students, what I do is I'll take a simple riff and then I continue. We basically take that same riff and then we continue to just adjust it to include these techniques or whatever technique that we're focusing on in that specific lesson. And that way you don't have to continue to learn new exercises and new riffs for every single technique, because especially as a beginner, that can be pretty time consuming, a little bit hard. Not to say you shouldn't learn new stuff, but when you're learning these techniques, it's a lot easier if we just take something that you already know and then include these in. That's not really what we're going to do today. We're just going to talk about these techniques. I'm going to give you guys some tips. Let's talk about chugs. So the common down chug, it's going to be palm muted. So I'm going to rest my palm. I just have to rest that fatty part of my palm right here over the strings that I'm muting. You know, the further back towards the bridge I get, the less mute you're going to hear. The closer to the pickups that I get, it's going to be more isolated. And so there's kind of a sweet spot there, and that may determine on what you want your palm mutes to sound like. Mine's probably about an inch or so, maybe a half inch away from my bridge. So this motion here, more of a twist of a wrist, like I'm turning a key in a lock, versus the up and down motion like I'm drumming, is such a more efficient way to pick. And you can't always pick that way. Sometimes you do have to use that drumming kind of wrist motion. But for down chugs, I can definitely do that if I'm only chugging between 1 or 2 strings, but I want to make sure that my hand is in the right position. I don't want it to be way above the strings. If I'm trying to pick the 2 bottom strings here, I don't want my hand to be way up here to where I'm having to stretch to get to those strings. I want it to be right here, so my pick is basically right in the middle of those 2 strings as I'm at rest, as my wrist is straight. And then I can use that twist of or that key lock kind of twist of the wrist motion. And then alternate chugs are essentially the same thing, except for it's down up versus down down. Now let's talk about gallops. Gallops are kind of like a 2-note alternate chug, except for it's 3 notes. 1, 2, 3 with a rest, so it almost sounds like a gallop of a horse. Listen to it slowly. down, up, down, and then I rest, and then I always start on the downstroke, so I get that down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. And again, this is essentially like the chug motion. It's that turn the key in a lock kind of twist of the wrist motion. Same position of my hand. I don't want it up too high. I don't want it too low. I want it to be right in the middle of whatever I'm picking. So if I'm picking the bottom two strings, again, I want that to be right in the middle. If I'm picking just the bottom string, then I kind of want that pick to rest right in the middle of that bottom string. String skipping is essentially just playing between multiple strings. So the key to string skipping is that I'm not trying to go from one string to the next string using my wrist joint. I'm using my elbow joint in that sense, so I'm moving my arm like this. My wrist and my hand is essentially staying in the same position as I move across the strings with my elbow, and then it's just a slight movement of the wrist to actually pick that string. And I can alternate pick or I could down pick. So when I think of alternate picking for this style of guitar, Lamb of God comes to mind in that style of heavy riffing off this bottom string. What I found to be essential is that I find a good resting spot for my hand, and that's going to be either like right on the edge of the bridge here, for me, depending on what style of bridge you have, but right on the bridge there. And then depending on if I'm palm muting or not, I might be just right on the strings, right by the bridge, or I'm just off of the strings, just on the bridge, and you get a good motion with that riff. Tremolo picking is going to be essentially the same idea, it's just going to be a lot faster. The least amount that you move your wrist, it's going to be easier to play both of these techniques, but it depends on the sound that you want. With the alternate picking, you may want to go a little bit harder, a little bit more aggressive, so you're going to have to move that pick a bit more to get that sound. But for tremolo picking, just the very minimal movement is going to be ideal. The next technique that we're going to talk about is going to be legato. That's essentially hammer-on pull-off. Any form of just playing with just the left hand where you're not actually picking is going to be consistent with legato. So for hammer-ons, you want to drop your finger pretty aggressively to be able to get that note to ring out. And that's going to take a little bit of time to build up the strength to be able to do that. But the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, obviously, like anything. There's also a sweet spot to where you're applying more pressure than you need to, because you only need to apply so much pressure to get that note to ring out if you do it correctly. So if you're applying more pressure than that, you're just using unnecessary energy to do the same thing that you could do with less energy. The pull-off is just going to be a slight down pull, and then off is how are you going to get that note to ring out more vibrantly. But you want to be careful, because as you pull off, you can bend that string, you can bend that note and change the pitch of the note. You don't want to do that. You want to just bend it enough just to get that note to ring out the same that it would without actually bending and changing the pitch at all. And trills are essentially just consistent hammer-on pull-offs between two notes. So what I would suggest, if you're not very fluent with the legato and the trills yet, is just to warm up for a couple minutes every day, just playing trills between all your fingers. And again, the harder you push down, the more energy you're going to use, the harder it's going to be. So it's more of a tap versus a like push down and pull off motion for these trills. Slides are going to be the next technique that we talk about right now. And slides are probably one of the most essential ideas for left-hand agility and maneuvering around the fretboard, besides just moving from one note to the next. Very, very important to understand these and to get good at them. The key to slides, absolute key, again, like the hammer-on pull-offs, we don't want to push down too hard. So this is a test that I have all my students do right away. Just let's go to the 5th fret of the A string. Just start picking and start pushing down on that fret until you get the note to ring out. And pretty much every single time I have somebody do this, they realize that they push down on these notes harder than they need to. As a beginner, it's going to be harder to push down because your fingers aren't strong. You don't have the calluses built up on your fingers yet. But as you get better, as you play a bit more and your hands get a bit stronger, then it's going to be easier to push down on those frets, on those strings. So this is a little experiment that you should do maybe like once a month, and then teach yourself how hard you actually need to push down. If you have your guitar, try to do this real quick. Push down like as hard as you can and try to slide to another note. It's a lot harder than if you're just barely pushing down. And then essentially it's just practicing your aim to get from one fret to the next. The pinch harmonic. Probably the goat of all techniques. I used to compare it. Actually, I made a few videos comparing it to the 360 flip of skateboarding, because that's like the trick that everybody, as far as street skating goes, that's the trick that everybody wants to do right away. That's like the coolest trick to do. Pinch harmonics is kind of like the coolest thing to do on guitar when it comes to metal and metalcore, this genre of music, I would say. So let's talk about pinch harmonics. It's basically just a squeal. And what is happening is, if you pick, let's do a little test here. Just rest your first finger above the 5th fret, but don't push down at all. And you get that harmonic sound coming out, right? So with a pinch harmonic, essentially what you're doing is you're kind of isolating that harmonic just with this hand. And the way you do that is by, hitting the string with your pick, and then scraping your thumb or tapping the string with your thumb right after, which means that you have to be very light with your picking in order to get that to happen. So that might be, if you're struggling with this technique, that might be one of the issues you have, is that you're trying to dig in real hard. It's just a very, very light pick motion. Sometimes I even kind of catch my knuckle on my first finger here as well, and I always kind of pick them with a pretty good angle on my pick, almost all the way to the side. It seems to help better for me. Something also that I've noticed with the left hand is that if I'm pushing down on the fret, like right in the middle of the 2 frets, not close to the actual fret that I'm trying to ring out, it seems to not work quite as well. And I also avoid pushing down on that note, on that fret, until right as I pick and I push down, and I almost catch some of that harmonic with in this sense, with your finger just resting on it. And then also finding the spot up here between your fretboard and your pickups that is best for isolating those harmonics. The last technique that we're going to talk about isn't something that anybody really ever talks about. I've heard a couple people mention this and speak about it. Brendan Ellis from Black Dahlia Murder, I've heard him talk about this before, and I know that Phil, who used to be in As I Lay Dying, and I don't know what he's in now, he's uses this technique, I notice a lot with his riffing. So let's talk about what it is. Essentially, a lot of riffs that you're going to come across, especially with the early and mid 2000s metalcore genre, Bullet for My Valentine, Kill Switch Engage, not as much Kill Switch, but As I Lay Dying for sure, and Trivium, older Trivium, they use pedal tone riffing a lot, this style of riffing, to where it's like you're basically coming back to this low string. Usually with a lot of these riffs, it's open low, and then you're playing notes like kind of a melody in between, basically anchoring off of the low string, and then playing isolated notes, usually on the 5th string or the 4th string. Good example is like Light to the Flies by Trivium. Also Confined, As I Lay Dying. And if you notice, when I play those 2 riffs, the Trivium riff I was playing all down picks, and the As I Lay Dying riff I was playing down on these chugs on the low string, but I'm up picking these isolated notes. So there's going to be a little bit of difference in the sound But if you get good at up picking and you do it correctly, then you can get pretty close to the same sound, and it's very hard to differentiate this right here versus this. But it conserves a lot more energy. It's a lot easier to up pick these notes than down pick every single note, especially in the beginning before you get your technique like on point. It's a lot easier and it takes a lot less energy, and ultimately you want to be able to play through entire songs, and that can be kind of difficult in the beginning. So this is a way to conserve energy, or even like as you become a more advanced guitarist and you're in a band and you're playing live shows, your arm might get tired anyways, and that's just another way to conserve energy. Or maybe that's the style that you like to play. Maybe that's most comfortable for you. But either way, I would suggest that you learn this technique and you get good at it so that you can either implement it into your playing as you're getting tired, or maybe that you implement it into your actual riffs and that's the way that you want to play. Anyways, that was all 9 of the techniques that I wanted to talk about in this video. I didn't cover every single metalcore technique out there, but I covered, I think, the ones that are most essential and the ones that I use most and the ones that you're going to see most in 2000s metalcore, like what I teach mostly. And if you are a beginner metalcore guitarist, so you've only been playing for a year or so and you don't really truly understand this style of music and you want to learn it as quickly as possible, and you're kind of realizing that going online and going on YouTube and trying to figure it out is not really working out and it's going to take you forever if you even figure it out, I have a program that teaches all that. I basically just give you all the video recorded lessons. Like I said, we go through and learn just riffs, and we learn the ideas and the techniques, and then we get into the metalcore scale, a little bit of the theory. Basically every idea that I spoke about in this video and in the beginning, what I talked about, we get into in my program. You also get all the backing tracks, you get all the tabs, and I have actually $300 worth of bonuses that I give away to people that buy it from these videos or buy it from my YouTube link. So if you're interested in that, there is a link in the comments, there's a link in the bio of this video, there's a link in my bio, my YouTube bio. Check it out. We'd love to have you. I believe I'm accepting new students at the moment.